after the latest set of flashbacks, I've combed through the entire story, picking up little bits and pieces of information Oda has been drip feeding us, and today I have a story to tell you. A story of love, tragedy, disillusionment, and sorrow. Okay, that was very dramatic. But yeah, today I'm going to create a timeline of events that links the three main figures of the God Valley turned to Revolutionary Army flashback. That's quite a mouthful. But our story begins 55 years ago with Garp and his wonderful wife, let's call her Garpette, doing something that would get me demonetized very quickly, and 9 months later, little Dragon pops out. But quick side note, who names their kid Dragon anyway? I mean, is that his real name? Anyways, as I said, 55 years ago, the father of our protagonist was born. With the information we have now, we can guess that Garp was at least somewhat involved in Dragon's upbringing, if nothing else to the same extent as he was in Luffy's, but probably even more so since this video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN, and Surfshark, which is a virtual private network, is an award-winning VPN. You may think it's something you don't need or you don't understand what a VPN does or how it works. Well, I'm here to help you with that, because a VPN is your own private network that you can use to protect your information, while for us, of course, streaming and shopping is close to Black Friday, or just casually browsing the internet, which we use a lot. It's funny because incognito mode to some people is very secure, but fun fact, all it means is your browser isn't saving cookies. Your ISP can still track your activity and collect your data. It also does not stop websites from seeing your location. I know, calm down, it's a bit crazy, but I have a solution. With Surfshark VPN, which has 3,200 plus servers in 100 countries, mind you, it blocks ads, trackers, malware, and even phishing attempts from users trying to steal your information. We are anime fans over here, so if you want to get access to that site that may be a little sketch and you want to be safe, Surfshark probably should be used to get our anime fix safely. Even if you go out of the country, you can change your virtual location so you can continue business as usual with your shows, etc. So to start browsing safely, click the link below, and it's an amazing Black Friday deal going on, by the way. So use code B.D.A. to get up to 6 additional months for free, and you also have a 30-day money-back guarantee as well, but I guarantee you won't need it. Guys, click the link below and protect yourself today with Surfshark. Sometime during his young adulthood, he becomes an aspiring justice-seeking Marine, just like his father, whom he most likely looked up to. We still don't know much about this period, but what we do know is that Dragon became disillusioned with how the Marines operate, saying that he, quote, found no justice there. But an interesting proposition is that he rose to the position of admiral against Garp's wishes, which led him to see how celestial dragons operate up close. I mean, to our knowledge, he would be the youngest admiral in history, but witnessing the terrors of slavery, murder, and assault, and being in charge of protecting the perpetrators is something that could have probably led Dragon to eventually leave the Navy. Again, we're speculating. Now, during this time is also the period of Kuma's childhood. Tyrant Kuma, as he became known later in life, was born 47 years ago in a remote hospital, we presume hospital. At the time of his birth, the hidden government agents were also present, and both Kuma's father, Clap, as well as his mother and him were enslaved by the celestial dragons. The reason for this was because his father belonged to a rare buccaneer race, which was known for their physical strength, making them ideal slaves for the world nobles. Now, being the son of a buccaneer, Kuma also inherited some of his genes, so he had the same buccaneer blood inside him. So then, Kuma spent the following 9 years growing up as a slave, enduring the hardships of trying to hang on to life every day. Sounds like 2023, but during this time, his mother passed away, and she was quickly accompanied by Clap, who was dancing at night. I don't know, but he was ruthlessly shot in the back of the head while telling an old buccaneer folklore story of the warrior of liberation. I somehow wonder if that will become important later. Anyhow, 9 years after Kuma's birth, there was a once in 3 year special event called the Native Cleansing Festival, where the celestial dragons would be unleashed upon an island and completely eradicate that island's population as if they were hunting wild animals. Typical celestial dragon behavior. This go around 38 years ago from today, the place of the festival was a recently annexed non-government affiliated island called God Valley. Alongside the natives, many of the slaves were released to be hunted as well. Among these names were some of the characters we know very well, and some we would soon love and cry for. There were Kuma, of course, then Emporio Ivankov, as well as a slave girl by the name of Ginny. Poor Ginny. So during the God Valley incident, these three grouped up and formed an escape plan. The first part involved Ginny, who had secretly broadcasted a message revealing what's happening on the island, which attracted both the Rocks pirates as well as Roger pirates, and in response, Garp. It's important to mention that God Valley went down before Dragon formed the Freedom Fighters, so it is more likely that he was still in the Navy. So I would not be surprised if it is later revealed that Dragon was actually in God Valley during the incident, and the Native Cleansing Festival might have been even what made Dragon start losing faith in the Navy, or the straw that broke the camel's back. Either way, while the chaos ensued on the island, Ginny, Kuma, and Ivankov found the grand prizes for winning the festival, which was Kaido's future dragon fruit, as well as the pawpaw fruit. Now, Big Mom snatched the dragon fruit from Ivankov's hands, but Kuma did not stop to hesitate, and he ate the pawpaw fruit. With it, he managed to escape from the island together with his friends. We did not see that. And he also saved over 500 innocent people from the island. Did not also see that. Would have been cool, but maybe we get some OVA or something later. From this point on starts a period of peace in Kuma and Ginny's lives, but conflict still rages elsewhere in the world. Sometime during the period of the next 13 years, more than likely in the latter half of those 13 years, a new group calling themselves the Freedom Fighters, born with Dragon as its leader. Now, 13 years after God Valley, we see Kuma and Ginny living peacefully and reacting to the newly issued bounty posters for the Freedom Fighters. From their dialogue, it seems as if the group had been operating for a short while already, but not too long. Considering their lack of reaction to seeing Ivankov's poster in the newspaper and their surprise at seeing him later on, he most likely joined the Freedom Fighters in the following 3 years after the bounty posters were released. Why exactly 3 years? Well, that's because the next event in our timeline is the uprising of the Sorbet Kingdom 22 years ago. This is the point in the timeline where all of our main characters meet each other, reunite, and work together. With the awful Sorbet King wanting to cut away the cancer of their land by getting rid of the impoverished south region of the country, people stand up to him, with Kuma being at the forefront. But they are unsuccessful, and they end up being imprisoned until the man, the myth, the legend, Monkey D. Dragon arrives with the rest of the Freedom Fighters to save the day. Now, they overthrow the king, and they free the people. And it is at this point that Kuma and Ginny decide to join the Freedom Fighters and fight for the cause of overthrowing the oppressive world government regime. Now, during the same year, the tragic Ohara incident and its genocide happened, and after recruiting Kuma, who became the third central figure in their organization, together with Dragon and Ivankov, the Freedom Fighters became larger and stronger, evolving into the Revolutionary Army. It is also worth mentioning that in the 3-year period before the Sorbet Kingdom Rebellion, Dragon also attended Roger's execution, as well as approached Dr. Vegapunk, asking him to join his cause, which the genius doctor refused, but Vegapunk and Dragon became close acquaintances after the Ohara incident, which becomes very important later on in the timeline, as Vegapunk has close ties to both Kuma and Bonnie in the future. This does mark a new period in the lives of our heroes, the Revolutionary Army period, because they went around the world saving people and fighting the world government. Now, during this time, Dragon and Crocomom, Luffy's mother, whose identity we don't really know yet, they had a child by the name of Monkey D. Luffy, who was then promptly forgotten about and left to live with his punch-happy grandfather and strangely affectionate mountain bandits. Talk about the Jing treatment. Anyways, this heavy revolutionary phase continued undisturbed for 8 years, until that fateful day where tragedy struck. The day that Ginny got recaptured by the Celestial Dragons. Man, this is such a horrific event, because Ginny, who had lived her childhood as a slave, was now once again their prisoner over 2 decades later. She escaped the horror of living on the red line, only to be brought back again. And somehow this continued for 2 years until a Denden Mushi was heard. They answered, and on the other line it was her. They didn't want me around after I got sick. I was thrown away. What a stroke of luck. That statement, brutal. And to top it all off, once Kuma reached her location, she's already dead, and what he finds is a child called Bonnie. He swears to raise her like she was his own kin and buries his love. Another 5 years pass, and in that time, Kuma balances being a revolutionary and a father to Bonnie. This is also the period where Sabo is seemingly murdered by the Celestial Dragons and saved by the revolutionaries. But in Kuma's life, you cannot experience too much happiness for too long, and he discovers the same blue jewels that killed Ginny on Bonnie's cheek. Now, after that, he leaves the army to devote himself to his daughter, and Dragon's best doctor gives her a prediction of living until her 10th birthday, in the best case scenario. This leaves Kuma crushed, and only a year later, the former tyrant king of Sorbet returns. This time around, Kuma is a different man. The following event would go down in history as the one-man revolution. All of the hatred and pain that Kuma endured, it all comes to a boil, and the tyrannical king is destroyed and banished from Sorbet Kingdom. For now. In the aftermath of the revolution, people of the Sorbet Kingdom beg Kuma to become their new ruler, and he has no choice but to accept it, similarly to how George Washington became the first ever president in the United States. But thanks to the world government, in the outside world, Kuma was framed as a violent revolutionary and proclaimed as, Tyrant Kuma. This is also when Bonnie eats her age fruit, but how she got her hands on it is yet to be explained. But since Kuma had his successful revolution, we have to make sure he isn't happy for too long, and that is why the despicable former King Bakori returns with Marines as his backup. Kuma goes out to confront them, finishes finishing him once and for all, and because of that he becomes a pirate for attacking Marines, the same way that Zoro did more than 1,000 chapters ago, and goes out to sea, leaving Bonnie on sorbet. During his time as a pirate, Kuma travels the world looking for a way to cure Bonnie's sapphire scales disease, but to no avail. He also reunites with Dragon at some point and is directed to a certain big-headed doctor. As he meets with Vegapunk, he brings Bonnie along, and at last he finds a way to cure her. Vegapunk proposes a very modern real-world concept called a stem cell transplant. Basically, stem cells are the cells which are sort of a base material for all the different special cells that our body produces, and this transplant introduces new stem cells into the body of the patient. In return for the treatment, Vegapunk and Kuma start working together on the process of researching the Buccaneer blood and creating an army of soldiers of science which would protect the people from evil pirates, the Pacifista Project. And this is as far as the flashback takes us so far. There's still some bits and pieces to uncover, but the main part of it is over and we have our answers. What follows after this is presumably a long period of treating Bonnie and researching Kuma to create the Pacifista. We still don't know why Kuma had his emotions and even free will extracted. I'm going to guess Saturn, but chapter 1100 is at our doorstep. I presume that we finish off the flashback, we get some more about Saturn and his involvement, and it would be a great way to culminate it. And we go back to Egghead, maybe the final panel, to see Kuma arriving in Egghead. The next time we see any of the revolutionaries is during the main story's timeline, in the pre-time skip when Dragon remembers he has a son, and he saves his life during the clash of future emperors, Luffy and Buggy Clowney in Logtown. Next, we see our good old friend Kuma after the defeat of Crocodile during the Jaya arc. Here we only see a brief cameo, but it is very apparent that he's not the same man he used to be. We don't know it at that point, but Kuma had gotten captured by the world government as a revolutionary agent, but the one Dr. Vegapunk seemingly saved his life, and instead of making an agreement where Kuma and his daughter would be spared, but he would instead become a warlord and Vegapunk would experiment on him, making him a cyborg and creating combat-ready clones called pacifistas. The first longer appearance we get from Kuma in the present is at the end of Thriller Bark, but nothing happened there, so we have nothing to talk about, and should rather move on to Sabaody Archipelago, where Kuma together with Rayleigh actually saved the Straw Hats from Kizaru in the aftermath of the assault on St. Charlos. His actions here are the last straw for the world government, and as a consequence, he loses the last of his humanity and free will. Also protected the Straw Hat ship for 2 years. After that though, every time we see him, he is shown as a machine, no different than the endless pacifista created as his clones, being ordered around, kicked, and in the end, just like Ginny, back as a slave to the ruthless celestial dragons. He didn't even get to see his daughter Bonnie on Sabaody, even though they were so close to each other. How poetic though. A little boy who was born into slavery, spending his childhood barely hanging on to his miserable life, listening to the tales of the warrior of liberation Nika, dreaming of a better tomorrow where he could simply eat as much as he wanted to until his belly was full. A boy who met his love as a young man while trying to help people and ease their burden and pain. The one who saved countless people and lost his biggest treasure, his Ginny, in the process. The forever gentle and compassionate man who let them take all of his emotions to save his daughter. Ginny's last legacy. He lost his last bit of humanity saving the same deity who he prayed would one day save him as a little boy. But with Egghead Island, the pieces are finally in place. Bonnie's here. Now fully aware of her father's past, he is most likely also flying towards Egghead. Vegapunk, the man who extracted the emotions out of him, but most likely has a way to give them back, is here as well. And most importantly, Luffy. The warrior of liberation is there, and it is time for Kuma to finally hear the drums of liberation that his father spoke of when he was little. So that is basically the gist. This is how we got here. This entire story has gotten us to this point, but the central theme of Kuma's story, of Kuma and Bonnie's story, is pain. And with that pain, what if Kuma can transfer that pain into something else? We know he can remove pain. Can he pull pain from emotions? Trauma? One thing about Kuma is that he's been through a lot. Not only him, his people. What if for Kuma's awakening, because we don't know if we've seen it yet, that he can actually pull pain from emotions, trauma, and also his people, and he unleashes the biggest Ursus shock on Saturn, where he is releasing the pain of the Buccaneers onto Saturn. The beauty of that is Saturn has been saying that the Buccaneers were born to be slaves based on their body. Would it not be poetic if that same pain was then casted onto him? Here is pain. Here is what this feels like. I think it'd be a great way to end Kuma. Not necessarily end Saturn, because I think Kuma has to see the warrior of liberation, but Saturn needs to be fixed. He needs to be in pain. And I can't think of a better character to usher in some pain more than Kuma.